Westminster was not prepared for what hit it. Overnight, the Labour Party went from projecting strength to facing a total breakdown of leadership. What began as political rumblings quickly escalated into a full-blown crisis, unravelling live on national television with a level of intensity rarely seen in modern British politics. Keir Starmer, who once promised a fresh start and a return to accountability, is now entrenched at the centre of a financial scandal so massive it has stunned even his closest allies. A staggering £22 billion, 0 pence, in misallocated funds has been traced back to his leadership circle, and the fallout has been nothing short of catastrophic. Within a matter of hours, 43 MPs had publicly stepped down, unleashing a chain reaction that is still unfolding. These weren't minor resignations, they were high-ranking shadow ministers and party veterans. People once loyal to Starmer's cause, now openly walking away in protest. The accusations are no longer whispers. They come with documentation, insider reports, and a paper trail that points to secret financial dealings rooted through obscure companies and opaque contracts. What Labour tried to manage behind closed doors has exploded into the public domain, revealing not just political mismanagement, but an organised effort to divert public money into private hands. And the country is watching it all come apart in real time. The wave of resignations didn't erupt out of nowhere. It was triggered by a leak so damning it shattered any remaining illusions of party unity. The first blow came from a senior figure in Starmer's inner circle, who released a set of internal documents exposing a maze of hidden payments and shadow contracts. Once the floodgates opened, more MPs followed, each departure carrying new evidence, new allegations, and fresh outrage. Investigators were quick to connect the dots. At the heart of the scandal lies a network of shell companies that received billions in party funds under the guise of campaign operations. One of the most glaring examples involves a so-called consultancy firm awarded £3.4 billion, 0 pence, to handle Labour's digital strategy. But on closer inspection, the company didn't have an office, staff, or public footprint. Its only traceable link was to a close ally of Starmer, who helped coordinate his leadership campaign. Another firm pocketed over £1 billion to support Grassroots mobilisation. Yet none of Labour's local branches ever worked with them. The deeper journalists and whistleblowers dug, the more absurd the pattern became. Inflated contracts, duplicate invoices, non-existent deliverables. Each discovery painted a picture of financial abuse that wasn't just careless, but calculated. And this wasn't old history. These contracts were approved recently, signed off by officials with direct access to the party's highest decision makers. For many, it no longer looked like mismanagement. It looked like a heist, hiding in plain sight. As the documents spread and resignations piled up, the public's reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, crowds gathered outside Parliament, waving placards and demanding accountability. Long-time Labour voters, furious at what they saw as betrayal, began burning their membership cards on camera. The anger wasn't limited to online outrage. It was physical, vocal, and growing by the minute. Hashtags like Labour Collapse and Starmer Scandal trended across every major platform, with tens of thousands demanding answers. But this wasn't just political theatre, it was personal. The scandal struck a nerve in communities that had trusted Labour to stand for fairness and social justice. Now they watched in disbelief as their contributions and hopes were tied to luxury invoices and shadowy firms. Inside Labour headquarters, the atmosphere turned frantic. Emergency briefings were held one after another, with press officers scrambling to control the narrative. But each statement only deepened the crisis. Some officials claimed the leaks were misleading, others suggested the resignations had been pre-planned. None of it held up. The damage was too extensive and the documents too concrete. Meanwhile, Labour's remaining MPs struggled to maintain composure under pressure as even more of their colleagues signalled intentions to quit. The story wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating and dragging the entire party with it. The political cost of the scandal began to mount at lightning speed. Labour's polling numbers plunged below 20%, an unheard-of collapse for a major opposition party. Union leaders, once key financial lifelines for the movement, cut off donations indefinitely. Across the country, regional party offices closed their doors in protest. Constituency groups suspended local campaigns. Inside Parliament, the Labour frontbench looked hollowed out, gutted from within. But perhaps the most terrifying detail for party insiders wasn't the public backlash. It was the rumblings of what else might be buried. Several whistleblowers stepped forward, warning that the £22 billion sterling, 0 pence, figure may only represent the surface of a much larger, concealed operation. Internal audits had allegedly been blocked. Sensitive emails were deleted. Staff were instructed to avoid cooperating with any independent investigations. One staffer, now under protective anonymity, claimed to have handed over hundreds of internal documents to a cross-party watchdog. These files reportedly include contract breakdowns, payment trails, and communications implicating senior leadership in coordinated obfuscation. And while the Labour leadership attempted to project control, Starmer himself vanished from public view. He cancelled all appearances and has not spoken directly to the press. Inside the party, pressure is building. Some insiders believe he's preparing to step down. Others think he's still clinging to the hope of riding out the storm. But with each new leak and every new resignation, it's becoming harder to imagine any path forward that doesn't end in total collapse. What started in Parliament quickly spread to the grassroots. Local Labour groups across the UK began issuing public statements of no confidence in Starmer's leadership. In cities like Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham, entire constituency branches shut down operations. Campaigns were suspended, meetings turned chaotic, and members openly demanded mass resignations at the top. Inside these regional chapters, emotions ran high. Long-time members accused local party officials of staying silent while corruption festered in plain sight. In Northern England, one branch chair described the atmosphere as mutinous, with members refusing to attend meetings unless leadership formally distanced itself from Starmer's team. Loyalty was no longer seen as a virtue, it was viewed as complicity. Meanwhile, the media fanned the flames. Hourly updates dominated the headlines. Investigative journalists released fresh evidence tying Starmer's campaign backers to inflated contracts and phantom companies. One report uncovered that 6 of the firms linked to the scandal had direct connections to people who once staffed Labour's headquarters during Starmer's leadership bid. These firms collected millions under vague descriptions like strategic communications but delivered no measurable result. In Parliament, remaining MPs were forced into damage control, answering tough questions from reporters and constituents alike. With the leadership fractured and trust eroding at every level, the party scrambled to maintain some sense of stability. But behind closed doors, another storm was brewing. One that could bring everything crashing down even faster. Inside Labour's inner circle, the mood had shifted from panic to paralysis. With front benchers fleeing and public fury intensifying, remaining leaders scrambled to hold emergency meetings away from cameras. But the urgency was impossible to hide. The party wasn't just facing a crisis, it was on the verge of political implosion. Momentum built quickly behind a no-confidence motion. Multiple MPs confirmed that the threshold for triggering a leadership challenge had already been reached. Allies of Starmer tried to delay the vote, hoping for time to regroup, but even they could feel the ground slipping beneath them. The dissent was no longer isolated, it had become organised. Fueling the fire was a fresh leak, an internal memo known among insiders as Operation Firewall. This document outlined a plan to sideline and suppress any MP who raised concerns about the financial irregularities. It proposed stripping committee roles, restricting media access, and sabotaging future candidacy for those who stepped out of line. The memo landed like a bomb. It proved what many feared. The cover-up wasn't accidental, it was coordinated. MPs weren't just ignored when they voiced concern, they were targeted. The party's mechanisms had been twisted, not just to enable misconduct, but to punish integrity. For many members, this revelation was the final betrayal. What remained of Starmer's credibility began to collapse from within. Calls for his resignation turned into demands for a full purge of everyone tied to the scandal. As Operation Firewall made headlines, emotional fallout gripped the party. Veteran MPs who had spent decades defending Labour's mission found themselves blindsided by the scale of deception. Some broke down during interviews, expressing guilt over encouraging younger members to believe in a leadership that was now being exposed for backroom deals and systemic betrayal. Trade unions, once Labour's core source of financial and ideological strength, joined the rebellion. Several general secretaries released blistering statements, pooling support and demanding an independent overhaul of party governance. The message was clear. Starmer's leadership had lost its mandate, not just in Parliament but across the movement. Outside of Westminster, the country's political map began to shift. Polls showed a rapid exodus of traditional Labour voters. Reform UK, the Liberal Democrats and even independent candidates started gaining traction in constituencies that had voted red for generations. One major poll showed Labour's trust rating crashing to its lowest level in modern history. The anger wasn't limited to political circles. Protests erupted across major cities with tens of thousands marching through London, Manchester and Glasgow. Signs reading "Where's the £22 billion sterling 0 pence?" and "Labour sold us out" flooded the streets. Videos of protesters confronting local MPs went viral, amplifying pressure on the party's leadership to act. Yet through all of it, Starmer remained silent. No televised statement, no apology, only a vague assurance from party spokespeople claiming everything was being reviewed. But at this point, no review could fix what was broken. Behind the scenes, legal threats began to pile up. Prominent barristers and ethics watchdogs signalled that the scandal had already crossed into potential criminal territory. The Crown Prosecution Service confirmed it was reviewing multiple complaints tied to fraudulent contracts, public fund misappropriation, and attempts to obstruct internal audits. Parliament's Standards Watchdog had already launched its own inquiry, and investigators from outside agencies requested full access to Labour's financial records spanning the last 3 years. According to early reports, the contracts in question weren't just suspicious. They may have involved forged documentation and fabricated service records. At the centre of this unfolding legal crisis stood Keir Starmer. If even a portion of the whistleblower claims proved valid, he could become the first opposition leader in British history to face criminal charges while still in office. But Starmer's silence continued. While political chaos swirled around him, he remained out of sight, allowing party spokespeople to offer generic denials and vague promises of cooperation. Inside Labour HQ, the crisis response team had taken control. Staff were instructed not to speak to the media, not to answer internal queries, and not to acknowledge the extent of the leaks. Security was heightened, and several key employees were quietly placed on administrative leave. Even as damage control efforts intensified, few believed the party could hold together much longer. The leadership vacuum had widened into a sinkhole, and the legal fallout was only beginning. While legal teams prepared for battle, the rebellion inside Labour spread like wildfire. In a shocking move, an entire council in northern England resigned from the party en masse. Their joint statement condemned the leadership as unrecognisable, accusing it of abandoning its principles and betraying its voters. They weren't alone. Local Labour chapters across the UK followed suit, passing symbolic no-confidence motions, halting campaign activities and calling for independent oversight. Grassroots organisations that had spent decades building Labour's local presence began to pull out. Community leaders refused further collaboration. Donations dried up. In areas once considered safe seats, support evaporated overnight. Even former Labour heavyweights, party grandees who had once defined entire eras, started speaking out. One high-profile ex-leader publicly slammed the current administration as corrupt and hijacked, calling for a complete reset. Their words sparked renewed protests, reignited national debates and pushed even more MPs to distance themselves from Starmer's leadership. But the deepest tremor came when reports surfaced suggesting this wasn't just a Labour scandal. Some of the firms tied to the £22 billion sterling 0 pence were now being linked to lobbying groups and cross-party initiatives. Early findings from financial regulators hinted that this web of misused contracts may extend beyond Labour's borders and could implicate figures across the political spectrum. Suddenly, it wasn't just a party scandal, it was a threat to the entire system. With each passing day, the scandal carved deeper into Britain's political establishment. Whistleblowers kept coming forward. Investigators uncovered new contracts, hidden payments, and internal memos confirming deliberate deception. What started as a labour crisis now looked like an institutional reckoning, and still Starmer said nothing. Inside Labour HQ, morale had all but vanished. Staff operated under strict silence, escorted in and out of buildings under increased security. Internal communications were funneled through a crisis control unit, bypassing standard channels. The atmosphere was no longer tense, it was frozen. Nobody knew who to trust, who would be next to resign, or when the final blow would land. Discussions of interim leadership plans went nowhere. Too many MPs had been tainted by association, and those who hadn't wanted no part in inheriting a sinking ship. Each hour brought more resignations, more backlash, more irreversible damage. And, outside, the public had stopped waiting. Protesters now camped outside Labour offices. Voters flooded radio shows and social media with fury. In polls, nearly half of the country said they no longer trusted any major party. Now even rival MPs were calling for sweeping reform, demanding a parliamentary commission to investigate every corner of party finance. The fear was no longer just about Starmer's fall. It was about what might be uncovered once the floodlights reached everyone else. The Labour Party, once Britain's main opposition force, was now adrift in a scandal that could reshape politics for a generation. And as the spotlight intensifies, only one question remains. How deep does this go, and who's next?